Have you ever imagined living a dream so real it blurs with reality itself? Or perhaps having an experience that transcends the body, reaching higher planes? The biblical story of Jacob's ladder invites us to question, was it a literal divine vision, or a profound altered state of consciousness, perhaps induced by fasting? Get ready to unravel this mystery that echoes through the centuries, challenging our understanding between the sacred and the human mind. The story of Jacob's ladder, vividly narrated in the book of Genesis, serves as the cornerstone and undeniable starting point for our discussion and investigation. Jacob, a man in a moment of profound vulnerability and uncertainty, is on the run. He has just deceived his brother Esau to obtain the birthright blessing, and now finds himself forced to leave his home in Beersheba to escape Esau's wrath. Seeking refuge with his uncle Laban in Haran, he sees a ladder. The Hebrew word salam suggests more of a ramp or a series of ascending steps that rises majestically from the earth and reaches the very heavens. Along this ethereal and celestial structure, angels of God are in constant motion, ascending and descending, creating a vibrant bridge, a true portal between the earthly and the divine planes. The scene is dynamic, filled with movement and purpose. What was the exact nature of this transformative experience? Was it, in fact, a literal divine manifestation, where Jacob had a clear and direct vision of the celestial realm and its messengers, a miraculous intervention? Or, on the other hand, could the elements of his situation, the extreme fatigue and physical exhaustion from the long journey, the psychological isolation and loneliness that accompanied his flight, the anxiety and stress of imminent pursuit, and the possible though not explicitly mentioned condition of fasting, a common practice to seek divine revelations in antiquity, which could have been accidental due to his lack of resources, have influenced his state of consciousness? Could these factors have induced an experience so profound, vivid, perceptually real, and internally transformative that he, within his cultural and spiritual context, interpreted it as a direct and unquestionable divine intervention? This chapter serves as the foundation and the central inquiry, setting the enigmatic scene and the multifaceted mysteries we will seek to unravel in the following sections, delving into the depths of science and spirituality to understand Jacob's vision. As night falls in a desolate and uninhabited place, later to be consecrated as Bethel, Jacob seeks rest. The landscape around him is arid and inhospitable, perhaps a reflection of his state of mind. He proclaims the sacredness of the place, exclaiming, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." He renames the place Bethel, which means house of God, marking it as a meeting point between the human and the divine. In an act of consecration and devotion, he erects the stone he used as a pillar, anoints it with oil, and makes a solemn vow to God, promising faithfulness and tithes. He uses a simple stone as a pillow, a powerful symbol of his deprivation, the hardship of his journey, and the uncertainty of his future. It is in this setting of loneliness, exhaustion, and deep anxiety that the extraordinary erupts into his consciousness. Jacob falls asleep and is granted a dream of unprecedented clarity, realism, and impact. At the pinnacle of this grand vision, the Lord himself appears. God not only reveals himself, but reaffirms to Jacob the solemn promises of the covenant made with his revered ancestors, Abraham and Isaac, a vast and countless progeny possession of the land, where he was resting at that very moment, and the unwavering guarantee of protection and blessing throughout his journey. No matter the challenges, the promise is clear. I am with you and will guard you wherever you go. Upon waking, Jacob is filled with reverent awe and a deep conviction. The biblical narrative, in its richness of detail and its ability to evoke vivid imagery, invites us to a series of profound and complex questions. To deepen our understanding of Jacob's vision, transcending a purely literal interpretation, It is imperative that we explore the fascinating and mysterious universe of lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences. This lucidity is what distinguishes them from ordinary dreams. In some cases, this awareness allows the individual significant control over the dream environment. One can fly, create objects, consciously interact with characters, and even alter the dream scenery itself. The vividness and perceptual clarity of a lucid dream can be so intense that the dreamer, upon waking, finds it difficult to distinguish the dream experience from physical reality. Or even for Jacob's mind processing information in a nonlinear and archetypal way, as is common in deep dream states or moments of great introspection. If Jacob was in a state of deep sleep, perhaps induced by extreme fatigue or even prolonged fasting, his brain could have entered a state conducive to the occurrence of such perceptual and cognitive phenomena. This chapter builds an intriguing bridge between the biblical narrative and the fields of consciousness psychology and sleep neuroscience. In doing so, it illustrates how elements of Jacob's vision find surprising parallels in contemporary accounts of altered states of consciousness, suggesting that his experience may not have been singularly divine in the literal sense of an external intervention, but rather profoundly human and transcendental, exploring the innate and still little understood capabilities of consciousness itself. The clarity and impact of Jacob's vision, with its vivid details and definite structure, resonate with the immersive nature of lucid dreams. These phenomena of human consciousness offer intriguing and surprising parallels with the biblical account, suggesting possible non-supernatural explanations for what Jacob experienced. Lucid dreams are states of consciousness in which the dreamer becomes fully aware that they are dreaming while the dream is occurring. Out-of-body experiences, in turn, are even more complex and mysterious phenomena, often described as the sensation of being separated from the physical body. The individual may feel as if they are floating above their own body, observing it from an external perspective, or even traveling to other locations, whether known or entirely unfamiliar. OBEs are frequently accompanied by extremely vivid auditory and visual perceptions, a sensation of profound reality, an expanded sense of consciousness that many describe as more real than reality itself. Accounts of OBEs often include seeing tunnels of light, encountering light beings or entities, and gaining profound and transformative knowledge or insights, elements that, symbolically or literally, may echo Jacob's ladder and angels. Jacob, in his vision, not only saw a ladder extending to heaven, but also observed angels ascending and descending upon it. This image, rich in symbolism and movement, can be interpreted as a projection of internal, mental processes or a vivid representation within an altered state of consciousness. The perceptual clarity of his dream, the sensation of divine presence, and the profound emotional and spiritual impact the experience had on him are characteristics consistently reported by individuals who experience both lucid dreams and OBEs. Many describe intricately detailed scenarios, interactions with beings that feel real, and sensations ranging from indescribable peace to euphoria, or, in Jacob's case, a deep reverent awe and wonder before something grand and sacred. The image of angels ascending and descending can be seen as a metaphor for the transition between different levels or planes of consciousness. The practice of fasting is a crucial and historically significant factor to consider when analyzing Jacob's vision from the perspective of altered consciousness. Although the biblical text does not explicitly state that Jacob was fasting at the exact moment of his vision, it is fundamental to understand that fasting was a deeply rooted and widespread religious and spiritual practice in virtually all cultures and religions of antiquity. Prophets, shamans, priests, and mystics from various ancient traditions and civilizations used fasting, often in conjunction with other practices such as sensory deprivation, the repetition of mantras or rhythmic chants, ecstatic dance, and prolonged meditation. The objective was clear: to induce altered states of consciousness and thus access dimensions considered sacred or receive messages and guidance from the transcendent. It was not merely an abstention from food, but a complex ritual with multiple purposes. Fasting was employed for various ends: ritualistic purification, preparing the body and mind for the sacred; an expression of mourning or penance, demonstrating repentance and humility before deities; and, crucially for our discussion, as a deliberate method to facilitate divine communication and the obtainment of visions, prophecies, and revelations. From a physiological and neurological standpoint, prolonged food restriction can trigger a series of profound and systemic changes in the body and, consequently, in the mind. When glycogen reserves are depleted, the body is forced to shift its primary energy source, entering a metabolic state known as ketosis. In this state, the liver begins to produce ketone bodies from fat. Material impulses. The mind became more purified, unhindered, and consequently, more receptive to spiritual influences or messages from divine entities. Physical deprivation was seen as a pathway to the liberation of the mind from worldly attachments, allowing it to ascend to higher planes of consciousness where the divine manifested. These ketone bodies not only supply energy to the body, but can also cross the blood-brain barrier, significantly altering brain metabolism and neural chemistry. The resulting biochemical changes from ketosis are capable of modulating the activity of crucial neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. These biochemical modulations can induce states of increased mental clarity, intensified introspection, sensations of lightness, and, in some individuals, the occurrence of vivid hallucinations, visions, or the amplification of sensory and emotional experiences, making Jacob's dream exceptionally real and immersive. Where food and rest were scarce, this could have prepared his organism for an acute, profound, and transformative perceptual experience. In this state of physiological and mental alteration, the line between the physical and the ethereal, between dream and reality, between the conscious and the unconscious, could have become incredibly thin, culminating in the vivid and profoundly impactful vision of the latter. This chapter delves into how fasting and other ancient ascetic practices, understood in their historical, cultural, and physiological context, may have significantly contributed to the induction of altered states of consciousness, providing a plausible and scientifically grounded framework for Jacob's experience. In ancient cultures, the belief was that by calming the demands and desires of the physical body, hunger fatigue. Therefore, if Jacob had undergone a period of fasting, whether intentional as part of a spiritual quest in his distress, or unintentional and forced due to the extreme circumstances of his flight, the narrative of Jacob's ladder is an extraordinarily fertile ground for symbolism, allowing for a myriad of interpretations that transcend the mere literalness of the biblical text and delve into the richness and complexity of universal human experience. This ability to resonate on multiple levels is what gives the story its enduring power and its continued relevance. It represents divine providence, God's constant presence, and His care for His chosen ones. The angels, in this context, are celestial messengers, beings who execute divine will and reveal God's proximity and involvement in human affairs. It can represent the solid and immutable foundation upon which spiritual experience is built, the material base that, paradoxically, serves as a gateway to the immaterial and the transcendent, but also the sacredness of the individual and subjective experience. It is the place where the divine and the human meet, a convergence point that can be both a specific geographical location and an internal state of being, an epiphany that transforms the perception of reality. This chapter delves into the vast field of symbolism, demonstrating how Jacob's vision is much more than a simple literal account or an isolated event. It is a malleable and timeless narrative, capable of being interpreted in multiple ways that transcend religious dogma, connecting it to concepts of depth psychology, universal spirituality, and the inherent multivocality of the complex human experience. The richness of these interpretations invites us to consider the profound complexity of consciousness and the incessant and inherent search for meaning and transcendence across all cultures and eras. Or, alternatively, the very human mind that, in deep rest and stillness, becomes incredibly receptive to higher perceptions, intuitive truths, and revelations that transcend common everyday logic. The transition from the chaos and uncertainty of Jacob's flight to the order, clarity, and revelation of the dream suggests a profound inner journey, a process of consciousness transformation that occurs amidst adversity and forced introspection. The dream, therefore, is seen as a fundamental prophetic revelation, an unwavering guarantee of the divine covenant, and a landmark in the history of Israel. For traditional Judeo-Christian theology, the latter is an unequivocal and powerful symbol of the uninterrupted connection between heaven and earth, a direct and divine channel of communication between God and humanity. However, if we approach this symbolism through broader and interdisciplinary lenses, such as those of Jungian analytical psychology, comparative spirituality, mysticism, and esoteric traditions, other layers of profound and universal meaning emerge. The latter can be metaphorically interpreted as the human spine, the central axis of our nervous system, where the ascent and descent of the angels represent the flow of vital energy and the awakening of consciousness within the self. This view powerfully resonates with Eastern concepts of chakras or energy centers, where the ascent of energy through the spine symbolizes the elevation of consciousness from the material and instinctual plane to the spiritual and enlightened. The angels, in this case, could be seen as archetypes of the human psyche, manifestations of the collective unconscious, or even projections of internal states of elevation, discernment, and connection. The stone that Jacob uses as a pillow, and which he later consecrates as a pillar, also carries deep and multifaceted symbolism. The location of the vision, Bethel, reinforces the theme of the sacredness of the space. How can the neuroscience of spirituality shed light on Jacob's ancient experience in a contemporary context, without disqualifying its profound significance? This fascinating and relatively new field of study, also known as neurotheology or the neuroscience of religion, is dedicated to investigating the neural bases of phenomena that are universally perceived as spiritual, religious, or transcendental. For example, studies with experienced Buddhist monks and meditators have revealed specific patterns of activation and deactivation in brain areas. There's observed activation in regions associated with self-perception, empathy, and emotional processing, while there's a notable reduction in activity in regions linked to spatial orientation. These hallucinations are characterized by vivid visions, sounds, and tactile sensations that blend with reality and are perceived as extremely real, precisely in this liminal state between sleep and wakefulness. For Jacob, embedded in a monotheistic religious context where God actively communicated with the patriarchs through dreams and visions, such a vivid and impactful experience was naturally and immediately interpreted as a direct divine intervention. He lacked the conceptual or neuroscientific framework to comprehend the biological basis of his vision. Today, with a more sophisticated neuroscientific vocabulary and tools, we can explore the biological and psychological basis of these events without, however, devaluing their spiritual depth or their transformative significance for the individual. This chapter establishes a fascinating and necessary connection between Jacob's ancient narrative and contemporary scientific discoveries, offering a bridge between faith, reason, and the complexity of the human mind. Jacob, lying down in a desolate place and in a state of physical and mental exhaustion, might have experienced one of these liminal experiences, where the mind, oscillating between states of consciousness, projects images and sensations in an extraordinarily vivid manner. This decrease in parietal lobe activity may explain the sensation of dissolution of self-boundaries, fusion with the environment, or the perception of non-duality, frequently reported in deep meditative states or mystical experiences. Such sensations of unity and vastness resonate with the grandeur of Jacob's vision. The goal is not to demystify faith or reduce spiritual experience to mere brain processes, but rather to understand how the human brain, this complex biological machine, processes and, in some cases, appears to generate these profound and transformative experiences. Research utilizing advanced brain imaging technologies, such as functional magnetic resonance imaging and electroencephalography, has explored brain activity during various spiritual practices. Returning to Jacob's context, sensory deprivation and fasting, as we have discussed in detail, are powerful factors that can significantly alter brain chemistry and activity. Glucose depletion in the brain and the subsequent entry into ketosis can modulate the activity of crucial neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. These biochemical modulations can induce states of increased mental clarity, intensified introspection, sensations of lightness, and, in some individuals, the occurrence of vivid hallucinations, visions, or the amplification of sensory and emotional experiences, making Jacob's dream exceptionally real and immersive. Furthermore, sleep deprivation, which Jacob certainly could have been experiencing due to his exhausting flight and lack of proper rest, is a powerful inducer of hypnagogic hallucinations, or hypnopompic hallucinations. It is crucial to understand that an individual's cultural interpretation and belief system fundamentally shape how an experience is perceived and reported. Despite all the analyses and interpretations we can apply to the vision of Jacob's error, be they deep theological, detailed psychological, meticulous, physiological, or advanced neuroscientific, we are ultimately confronted with the inherent limits of human understanding. Jacob did not wake from an ordinary dream or a fleeting hallucination. It represents the innate human aspiration to rise above the mundane, to touch the divine, to understand the inexplicable and the sacred. It invites us to recognize that there are dimensions of reality that may lie beyond our ordinary perception and our full capacity for understanding, be they divine, psychic, spiritual, or a complex fusion of all these. Jacob's story, therefore, is not merely an ancient account rooted in millennial texts, but a timeless mirror that reflects our own innate curiosity, our incessant search for purpose, and our wonder before the inexplicable and the sublime. It reminds us that, regardless of the final explanation or categorization we might give it, the experience of transcendence has an undeniable power to shape human perception and to lead us to contemplate the infinite that surrounds us and dwells within us. Mystery, after all, is often the richest source of wisdom and wonder. The presence of angels, mediators between the two planes, the earthly and the celestial, the human and the divine, reinforces the idea that communication between these dimensions is possible, even if their mechanisms remain an unfathomable mystery. Angels represent the continuous interaction between worlds, the permeability between the visible and the invisible. He awoke with a reverent fear, a sense of awe and wonder before the sacred, and the famous and powerful exclamation that forever marked the place. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Did he witness an unparalleled divine intervention, an epiphany of a supernatural nature? Or did he dive into the depths of his own mind, propelled by an altered state of consciousness? The answer, perhaps, does not need to be a binary choice. It may lie in the inherent beauty of the mystery, which reminds us that reality is far vaster, more complex, and multifaceted than our eyes can see or our reason can fully grasp. What's your own interpretation of this millennial enigma? This is the purest and indomitable essence of a mystical or spiritual experience. Whatever its origin, the overwhelming sensation of being before something infinitely greater than the individual self, something that transcends everyday perceptions and merely intellectual comprehension. It is an experience that shakes the foundations of personal reality, reorients the individual's life, and often propels them into a new journey of faith or self-discovery. Like many experiences that touch the threshold of the transcendent, Jacob's vision contains an irreducible element that defies full rational explanation and refuses to be completely contained or exhausted by any single scientific theory or isolated religious dogma. We can dissect brain chemistry, map sleep patterns, analyze psychological archetypes, and decipher the intrinsic cultural symbolism within the narrative. But still, a fundamental gap remains: the profound and undeniable sense of reality, the vivid experiential quality, and the transformative impact that such experiences have on an individual's perception, beliefs, and life. The latter, ascending to the infinite and connecting heaven and earth, symbolizes humanity's eternal and incessant search for meaning, for connection with the transcendent, and for knowledge that extends beyond what we can fully see, touch, measure, or rationalize. Perhaps the true and deepest message of Jacob's Ladder lies not in its literalness as a physical event or in a single definitive explanation, but rather in its ability to compel us to question the limits of our own consciousness and the vastness of the universe, both the external cosmos in its immensity and the equally vast and mysterious inner universe of each individual. The story of Jacob's Ladder continues to echo through the centuries, an undeniable invitation to profound reflection.